Yeah, I was gonna ask how long you've been in Washington because I'm not sure I knew that, or if I did, I forgot.
I don't think I ever told
Yeah, this
you
is news.
guys. Yeah, so my mom had some weird immune disorder nonsense, and it was looking like she spent like a week in the hospital because they were trying to get her platelets up, and uh, after nothing was working for the longest time, they were talking about like either removing your spleen or doing some other drastic measures, and so I was like, well, dang, all right, I'll move up there since it sounds like you're going to be needing help around the house. And so I did that, and then about a week or two after me moving up here, she promptly got better. So
Oh,
Wow,
I
good
mean, I'm
job.
glad she's better.
yeah, I'll take all the credit.
Yeah. She just needed to have you in closer proximity.
I was gonna say sounds a little sus on her part. Sounds like
Yeah,
that.
right. um, but I'm kind of glad I did though because I just needed a new change of pace. I was working security for like 8 or 9 years,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, it kills your soul just sitting by yourself for 12 hours at a time.
Yeah.
Graveyard.
I can't believe you did it for that long, man. That's crazy.
Me neither. It's really fun to think about. And now I live with my mom. It's such a
Hey, we've all been
when
there.
that's when it's still an upgrade.
We've all been there. Karina and Bradley lived with my parents for a while, not that long ago.
Yeah. In
Yeah, it's becoming way
between.
more common nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like what the just the state of the economy and how expensive renting somewhere is if you're going to be by yourself. Like, I don't think there's the same stigma as much anymore attached to it, especially because like you're working
Mm.
and stuff. Like you're not just like you know being
I
nobody and just being like
think.
Yeah,
whatever.
not
I'm
like
just like
freeloading.
mooching off my mom. Yeah, like
Yeah, but I think a
so
lot of people still assume that when they hear that like you still live with your parents. I think that's probably where people's
probably older
minds jump
people.
to. Yeah, yeah. I think it's probably a generational thing. Yeah.
And even if like societal, if their bar is lowered, my bar still hasn't been lowered. So every time I look in the mirror, I'm living with my mom, and you know,
Yeah, but like you did that for a reason. You did it for a reason, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So,
And if somebody asks, you could always be like, "Hey, she was having some pretty serious health issues. I moved in to take care of her."
I'll tell them whatever I need to tell them to make myself go to sleep
To
easier
be
at
able to
night.
look yourself in the eye.
Yeah.
isn't that what we all do all the time? It's kind of sad, right? Well, I feel like
For real.
most people in general are relatively insecure on a pretty deep level. Like, I'm definitely lumping myself into this. Like, I think we spend a lot more time thinking about how people perceive us than about just kind
Other
of being
people actually
honest, you
spend
know?
time thinking about us.
Yeah.
Well, especially in like first world countries, I don't think you really have. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody that like grew up in a Amazonian tribe or something like that, but I don't think that they have the same hang up as far as that's concerned.
It depends. And like in like third world countries and stuff, usually like a household is a generational thing. Like usually the sons will live with their parents until they're dead, basically. So like the house just kind of stays in the family generally, you know, because like I think a lot of times in third world countries you don't have people like moving out and moving over here in the country and moving over there. It's like the family just kind of stays in
Right.
the house and generation through generation just kind of like revolves through it, you know. That's how it was in Nepal,
Yeah.
anyways. And I could see that in general, like a lot of third world countries are more family oriented than the West is now. So,
What do you do when you have more than one kid?
all in the same house, dude. When you get married, your wife just moves in to your family's house.
I
Like,
think if it's I think girls probably move into their husbands'
yeah, yeah,
uh family's home. So you know, it's not like you keep all of your kids there. If you had a bunch of girls, they'd all move out, but if you had a bunch of
yeah.
boys, they'd probably stick around.
And then they have kids, and it's like you have multiple generations within the same house pretty consistently. I think. And that is very much not how most people live here. But it's kind of sad because like nursing homes are hella depressing, you know? And so it's actually like pretty sad that we just ship people off there uh, and instead of like taking care of people, you know?
First world Western civilization has a lot of hangups. Consumerism, the way that we treat each other, especially old people. The fact that everything that we own is, made by what are practically slaves, and we don't like to think about that. We love to bitch about other things that we
Yeah.
think we care about.
It's about the degrees of separation, right? If you put enough steps in between you and the problem, it's like it doesn't exist. And people just forget about it, even if they know that it's.
And then
Yeah.
And then we come up with our own things to complain about and feel sorry for ourselves about because we have it so good that we have to invent problems most of the time.
Yeah, God forbid your phone doesn't work or something. Meanwhile, some lady in the Congo is mining cobalt, and she's got a baby strapped to her back, working 12 hours, 6 or 7 days a week.
You know what's even weirder and like slightly more surreal is that we're all sitting here talking about this right now, and we're all 100% living it. It's not like it's not like we've all taken drastic steps to make the world a better place and we're reflecting on our journey. We're all surrounded by this shit and we're just bitching about it, but
we're
not
using the
doing
very
anything.
tools
Exactly.
that everybody yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of messed up. Should we get into this?
Here in a second, I just want to say sometimes for fun, I like to look around and just was that made by a slave? Was this made by a slave? How much did it cost to make this? How much was somebody paid? How many hands is it,
And then
passed by? Or
slave is all, of course, relative, right? There are different degrees of different factories in different countries versus mining in other countries, and there's definitely standards of living. There's going to be different tiers. It's not like anything made cheaply in a different country is directly awful slave labor, but I'm sure quite a bit of it is still.
Most of it is. And even the stuff that if they're not technically a slave, it's okay, but if you're working in a sweatshop, and that's your only job you can find, you might not be a slave. You probably are free to leave, but,
Yeah,
it's
but
really
are you
not
really,
a whole
right?
lot better.
Well, now that we've had that fun little conversation.
Okay, so we are kind of randomly doing Love, Death, and Robots, and initially the idea was to go episode by episode and do all of them, and after a little bit of discourse with Aaron, we decided let's do one podcast episode for each season, and we'll each just pick our favorite episode, or maybe not necessarily our favorite episode, but because I mean I haven't watched any of these in a couple of years at this point, so I just picked one that in my memory was kind of a weird or cool episode or whatever. I'm not sure how you guys exactly picked what you picked, but
You didn't rewatch that one for this?
well, I did, but not before I picked it.
Oh,
Okay.
I gotcha. Okay. I thought you were just literally going off of memory. I was like, okay, maybe you should watch that real quick. We can pause.
That'd be really impressive.
I don't think that my episode that I picked would, be my favorite either, but I think a lot of the episodes it'd be hard to talk about, other than being like, oh, this is just, objectively cool.
Uh-huh.
So I went the route of this is kind of cool and just and could lead to a deep conversation
For
about
sure. Yeah. Well, without further ado, I'm Nate.
I'm Aaron. I was waiting for Karina.
Oh, Aaron laughed, so I was just going to let him have it. I'm Karina.
And this podcast is limited to everything. Still alive 5 years later.
Is that how long ago did we start?
2019, I
2019.
think. That's what it says on our little podcast cover. And that's whack to think about, man. That is whack.
That's
Yeah.
that's something. Who wants to like? Which episode are we doing first?
I already have Aaron's pulled up, so let's do
Let's
that.
do
And
it.
by Aaron's, I mean Aaron's pick. Aaron, why don't you go ahead and introduce your pick for the app?
All right. Well, my pick was When the Yogurt Took Over. It's not very long. It's probably like 5 minutes or
Yeah.
so. And it's
Yeah,
basically
it's a short
about
one.
scientists somehow messing up some yogurt and making it sentient, and then this sentient yogurt is way smarter than us and ends up fixing all of our problems, and then eventually flying out into space.
In exchange for Ohio.
Right?
I
Yeah.
love
Small
that.
detail.
I love that. There's some
We
like
want
some
Ohio.
some random humor is really dumb. Like it can be overbearing, especially if there's like too much of it. But in small doses, if it actually like blindsides you, random humor like that can be really really funny. But if it's just like constant, then it's no longer random and it's not funny, right? If you're just like constantly as like it's a Mad Gabs, what is that, Mad Libs episode or thing, right? It's not funny
Yeah.
anymore, right? But this was funny where they're like the yogurt demanded Ohio. It's like
Yeah.
okay, sure, why not?
And it comes back because then when everything else just completely falls apart in the world, Ohio's perfectly fine.
And that is funny. I like that too. Yeah. I
I already watched it. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one thing I found kind of, I don't know if I want to say lazy or just maybe as a way of hastening to the actual point of the episode, but I thought it was kind of silly that they're just like, and one day the yogurt became sentient, and it was just like that was it. There was no like, there's kind of a logical leap. It's like they're experimenting, and then all of a sudden time elapses, and then it just becomes sentient one day.
Yeah, which so I mean, you guys know what this is kind of like a metaphor for, right?
Well, I was
This
gonna
episode.
ask if it could be possibly anything other than AI.
I mean, I haven't even given that the benefit of thought, but I mean, go ahead and like try
As a mental exercise.
and tell me. Yeah.
Cholesterol levels in chimpanzees.
Close second.
I'm not gonna run with that, but it's possible.
I kind of had to do the same thing with the other episodes, though. Like try to figure out, some sort of deeper meaning to them, even if that isn't what.
Well, I think like
they were going for.
metaphorically speaking, yours, like the yogurt episode, is definitely the one that's like the most clearly. I don't know if either of the other
It's
ones
on the
are
nose.
at all, right?
But I think I got a pretty good one for the episode you picked. I don't know. What do you guys think about it, though?
I I think it's funny that that like everybody's just so chill with it. Like yeah, the yogurt rules us, but they've been pretty good to us, so we'll allow it. And it's like I don't know, like especially with the AI that's clearly alluding to AI. Like there are a handful of people who really like AI and are very like pro like let's do everything with this, but it seems like the general consensus is still very much that people would not want it to take over the planet and run everything for us. So it's hard to imagine like humanity letting anything that's non-human take over. I don't know. That's why it just kind of made me laugh. And throughout the whole thing, it was just like, yeah, everybody's just being like really cool about this, and I don't think that's how it would ever go down.
Well, I think it's doing kind of a Wall-E thing here, right? Where it's like, yeah, humans are hella dumb and super lazy, and they're kind of shit at running the planet, and so, like, of course
I
we just kind of
mean-
roll over, And so, like, it's going very extreme with that, and it's kind of saying like, this is where we're going, and in the future we could see that as a general trend as people get lazier and care less about quality of life and the planet and stuff like that, that we would just kind of roll over and be like, well, something else can take care of everything. Sure, let's just let it do that. I just want to like have my big gulp and watch TV, right? So
We kind of just talked about this in the beginning of the episode. We literally do this right now.
in what way?
Like,
Be more
I mean, there's a patch of plastic in the ocean that's like the size of the Texas, the
Uh-huh.
state of Texas, or the continental United States, or whatever. We consumerism has led us to using all this stuff, and it's all at the sacrifice of somebody else on the other side of the planet. We all know it, but we don't do anything about it. We consume just as much, and we are always looking for a way to consume more. So I think we already are kind of at that level where, yeah, give me that bill. I really don't care about the consequences. I'm here for a short time, not a long time. Or I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
New saying. Here for a short time, not a long
I'm here
time.
for a short time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just need a rude awakening. Like I think for me, it's happened over the past few years. Part of it is my wife being from Europe is much more environmentally conscious than I ever have been growing up. And so it's the sort of thing, like we were saying, like if you're enough degrees removed, then you just don't really think about it. It's so easy not to, right? And so a lot of people, I think, need some kind of like rude awakening or something to be like, maybe we should be taking some things a little bit more seriously, and also not politicizing everything would help too. But
Right. That is like the worst possible thing you could do for solving a problem is to make it a partisan issue, because then it's like, oh, well, I don't like so and so, or I don't like these people that align with this, so therefore I don't want to get on board with this thing that might objectively be a good thing. But yeah, I think there's like way too much of that, and then it makes
or
it
people
hard for,
just
like,
don't give it any more thought, right? They're just like, oh, recycling is like a liberal scheme to, whatever. And so it's like, oh, you
Yeah,
recycle,
yeah.
you're one of those people. And they like, there's no thought further than that, right? And the same is true for issues going the other way, right? So it's just, that's the biggest problem, is that everything is so politicized.
Yeah, so many things like science, and it keeps on flip flopping too. Like, I think, yeah, back in the '60s, a lot, or it was a leftist thing to do, to be skeptical of government and corporations and anti-war and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like nowadays it's kind of flipped to the other side, where, yeah, if you think anything, if you don't believe, like what happened with COVID, for example, 100% as given to you from the media, then chances are you are a right winger, or at least most people would assume you are.
But then right winger has like different. Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to have a big
It's a
political
spectrum.
discussion. Let's not get
Yeah,
too
right. Here we
let's
go.
bring it back. Okay, here's something I wanted to ask. How do you guys define what does AI mean to you guys? Because to me it means something very specific, and I'm wondering what it means to you guys.
Let's break it down. I think artificial is pretty concrete, but intelligence itself, like, you can do laps with that one and get nowhere really. Like, what is intelligence? Are plants intelligent? They talk to each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, intelligence is not black and white, right? Like it's a multi-tiered system. Like you have it's interesting to observe that humans, bar none, are obviously at the top of the metaphorical food chain, I guess, thinking about intelligence, right? Not to say that no other species has any intelligence whatsoever, right? And so then it's like, okay, well, like you have dogs that are obviously more intelligent than certain other life forms. We have chimpanzees and dolphins or whatever that have like interesting, sophisticated ways of interacting and communicating. So like it's definitely not just like a black and white thing, like either you have intelligence or you don't. Like it's definitely a spectrum. There's no doubt about that.
Well, but I would say that I would add a caveat to that, though. All of those examples that you gave exhibit something that computers don't, which is understanding. And like, yeah, chimpanzees aren't going to go to space anytime soon. Like, they're not intelligent on the same level that we are. But I think that I think something that gets, I don't know, when I listen to people talk about it, is that they confuse processing power with intelligence. And it's like, just because something is fast, just because something's efficient, just because something is really good at following the programming you gave it doesn't make it intelligent. Like, it's programmed to do that. Like, I remember in college I took an interesting class called the Philosophy of the Fantastic, and we went through a unit. I mean, it was all kinds of stuff. We talked about vampires and werewolves and zombies, but we had a unit on AI, and we listened to a TED talk, and I cannot remember who the guy was, but basically, like, he was saying, or like his argument was entirely based on like defining intelligence as like the ability to compute something, essentially. So like he was saying like, oh, if we had a computer that that it can process information so quickly that it can do the work of 100 like Stanford professors in what they would accomplish in 100 years, and it can do that in a day. Like, we don't want that around. That's dangerous. I'm like, that's literally what we designed computers to do. It's because they're efficient. Like, that's what we want them to do. We want them to do things quickly so that it saves us. We don't have to spend 100 years of human time doing this. Instead, we can give it to a computer that has programming that allows it to compute that for us, to process that information into something we can then use for something else. Like, and I feel like a lot of people just, it's like Chat GPT kind of thing. It's like, that's mostly just pulling stuff from like random places on the internet and putting it, and like, yeah, it has coding that allows it to put it together into sentences so that it's not just generating a bullet point list of facts, but it's still not intelligent. It doesn't understand what you're saying. It can't reason. It just has a program.
One interesting thing about that, with understanding, so I assume you guys have heard about AlphaGo. It's Google made this thing. It's a machine learning AI. They basically just taught an AI how to play Go. Just gave it the rules and then said, all right, now play against yourself, a trillion times, and then we'll check it back on you. And it ended up becoming so good at Go, and Go's like apparently much more hard than chess, much more complex. So I guess it served as a good test for this kind of thing. But yeah, they went against the world champion at Go and beat him, and it beat him with like a move that they were calling like novel and creative. And it's not like they programmed it to play Go, because that's how we used to do that with chess robots, and how they became so good at chess is they just learned billions of moves. No, this was we taught it the rules, and then we.
But
let
again,
it play
that's
against
something you
itself
can
for
program
many
to an
hours.
extent.
That is
You can
programming,
program
actually.
it.
Like, the program is,
Yeah.
here's all the information you need to know. Now run this scenario, a trillion times. Like, that in a way is programming. There's no input. There's no genesis of idea or epiphany or realization from the actual computer itself, right?
Well, there is though, because it plays against itself, and then when it realizes that it made a really stupid move and it just lost, then it's like, okay, so next time I will do this instead.
Mm-hmm.
And things are reinforced and all that kind of jazz. But I mean, is human intelligence that much different from that?
There's a fine line, I would say.
I feel like things like that are not as good of a comparison, though, because something like a game, it has set rules, which means there's a finite number of ways that like a scenario can play out within that, even if it's billions and trillions of different possibilities. Like, there is a finite, like, fixed, there's only so many ways you can play this game.
Here's what I would
something
say.
like,
What I would say is that in this scenario, the computer, one of the sides, could not choose to lose. It's because it's been programmed to play Go and to learn and to get better at it, right? Whereas in a human scenario, that's typically the goal, but you could also, randomly, and I'm putting that in quotes, you could randomly choose to lose. An AI learning how to get better at Go could not do that unless you told it to, right? So they still operate on commands. They can't have original thought.
Right, but so do humans, because we have biology.
but if I'm playing Nate at a game, something I can do or that Nate can do that a computer can't is that like I can do things that I know will piss him off in an attempt to maybe make him make a bad choice or just to annoy him. And like a computer can't do that. It can't read emotions. It doesn't know people. Like it can't, like, again, all of that would have to be pre-programmed in. You'd have to give it all of that information ahead of time. Versus, like, I could sit down with somebody I've never met before and pretty quickly get a read on them without them having to tell me anything. And I'd be able to determine based on how, like, their body language and how they reacted to certain moves I made, whether or not things were going well for them, if they were pissed off about how I was participating in the game, if they, like, a computer can't do that.
So you're talking, like, in this example, you are recognizing a pattern, right? Or
that sounds like a bait and switch.
You know, well, I mean, because that's what it is.
But it's not just pattern recognition, because I am human. Like, I understand things about a human that a computer never can because it's not a human. Like, it's very, very different from a human. So there's going to be things that I just know and understand instinctually. Like, yeah, there is a certain level of, like, if somebody always does something when they're excited about a move they made, or if they celebrate or whatever, like, that is pattern recognition. But there's, like, things in somebody's eyes you can see that a computer is never going to be able to pick up on that. Like, things like that where, like, it's not really pattern recognition because it might not be the same every time, like, or it might not have any kind of fixed pattern. You might only see it once. That's not pattern recognition. But you weren't, then. A computer can't learn from something it only sees once. No, but we can learn it because we're the same species.
How do we learn, though?
Well, because that's what we're, like, I guess if you want to use computer language, that's what we're programmed for. Like, we have a
that's kind of what I'm saying, though, is that
of human tissue that's organic. You can never have a computer that is like
but has electrical impulses and
yeah, but you can never have a computer with an organic brain. Like, you can never have a computer that's born.
Never's a strong statement.
You can't.
But
not in the way that a human is born. No, you can't.
Have you guys seen Blade Runner?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's totally fictitious.
Oh yeah, totally. But all this stuff was, I mean, literally 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We are living like in a new precedent, I would say.
What I would say is that I could see that I think it's gonna be like. So, kind of bring it back a little bit here. To me, AI means singularity, right? It means original thought. Anything less than that is not AI. It's still a computer program, right? To me, this is a situation where it's like, if you always move half the distance somewhere, you'll never actually get there, but eventually you'll get so freaking close that you can't tell the difference. I think that's where we're going to get to with AI. We will never get to the point where, or I guess I should say AI will never get to the point where it actually reaches singularity, where it can actually have original thought. But I think there's a very high possibility that it will get so close to that it doesn't really matter. Whether you call it singularity or not, whether it is singularity or not, it'll be so close to that it might as well be.
I would say I've never worried about like an AI takeover, just because in my mind, it's like, the AI is created by people. Therefore, AI is inherently limited by human technology, human knowledge. Therefore, it can never be smarter than us, even if it learns, even if it can genuinely learn and understand like people can. It is still a created thing. Like,
well, that's not exactly comforting, because
yeah, right?
what happens with all the great technological leaps, all the amazing inventions?
Sure, but I'm saying that AI, but like what you're saying, AI is never going to have the ability. Like, I don't think AI will ever have an original thought. Humans, however, can continue to have original thoughts. So therefore, they're always a step ahead.
But then the scary thing is who's in control of the AI. Right?
Well, that's why it needs to be regulated.
What, by the government? Yeah, fantastic. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
There's no good answer to this. There is no good answer. It's gonna be a problem. It already is. I mean,
yeah, even if it, yeah.
Like,
go ahead.
Well, if you think about it, well, I feel like maybe we've already peaked and we're coming back down. But I'm just thinking, like, with the usefulness of the internet, it will always be useful. But I think it's going to become a lot less useful from a getting information standpoint. And it already has lost a lot of credibility on that front, but it's going to lose it precipitously now, I think, because at this point in time, as of December 2024, 99% of the time you can still discern what is AI from what is not. A year, 2 years, 10 years in the future, I highly like you will not be able to anymore. Like you just will not be able to anymore. And I think audio and video is going to lose a lot of credibility, and actually we're going to bounce back a little bit to like face to face. It's going to become a lot more valuable again.
Yeah, there's a couple of ideas that people are trying to implement in order to figure this out, because I mean, I could send you guys some stuff where you literally cannot, like, it's becoming really sketchy in terms of determining whether it's AI or not, whether this is a pre-generated or altered video you're watching. But they did this thing, or they're talking about doing this thing where you will like scan your eye or something like that, and that will give you a crypto token that is particular to you, and that's how whenever you use anything, especially on the internet, it'll be connected directly to that, and so that's how people will determine whether it was a real person that actually did this or not. Because here soon we're gonna have an internet full of AI agents. I don't know how much you guys have heard about Google just dropping its Astra projects like a couple days ago. OpenAI is also doing this 12 days of ship miss, where they're
I don't know
releasing a
anything
bunch of
about
new
this.
stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, it would take forever to talk about
Sure,
all of it.
right.
But, so Google right now has this thing where you can literally let an AI control your computer, make purchases for you. It would just check on you to make sure that you actually want to go through with it. Or you can tell it like, hey, write me a program, and it will write the program on your computer instead of writing it over there on their server, and then you copy and pasting it and all that kind of stuff, which is what up to this point everybody did. So yeah, here soon I think the internet, I don't know if you guys have heard of dead internet theory, but it's this idea of most of the internet being or consisting mostly of AI garbage instead of actual humans. Articles, music, movies, all that kind of stuff.
It would be interesting to see the internet lose so much value. It would be very strange. And I would, in a way it's more frightening than it is exciting, but it would be very strange.
Yeah, we would have to like prioritize face-to-face interactions more.
Well, and I would say obviously like Nate said, it's not necessarily a good thing to be like, oh yeah, we should just have the government regulate all of it. But I do think that some of the things that would help would be like there's a lot of AI stuff that is just straight up like theft and stuff like that, whether it's art or writing or some of that stuff, where like it just steals from existing stuff that actual creators have made, and just uses it and combines all of this stuff it finds into whatever the requested project was. So I think that like taking steps to be even just to work on that, it's like these laws apply to humans. Like I can't record my own version of a Taylor Swift song and release it, and be like,
you mean these laws,
this is mine.
You mean these laws apply to Americans? Not every country has these laws.
Okay, right. But I'm saying that, but I would assume that to some extent a lot of countries do. Maybe not every single country, but I would assume at least most countries that are also doing a lot with like where people are using AI a lot are probably also countries where there are like copyright laws, where there are, there's laws against just being able to steal someone else's original work, whether that's a research paper or a piece of music or a painting or whatever. Like you can't forge it, you can't you can't take it and make it your own and then release it and be like, yeah, this is mine. Like, so I think that some of that would be helpful. Like if you start regulating those things and being like, no, this isn't allowed to exist because somebody can't, like, you know, if a student is doing this and like having AI write something and it's just pulling from a bunch of sources that aren't being cited, it's like that's plagiarism. And if you do that, you can't turn in a paper and get a grade on it. Like it's your professor will throw it out, your teacher will throw it out. So like applying that to a bunch of stuff, like obviously it doesn't solve all of the problems, but I think some of that would be steps in the right direction to make it really clear that like you can't just use this however you want to.
Yeah, in the same way that we had to kind of overhaul laws when the internet came out and people, you know, were able to just download music for free. I think we're going to need to overhaul our copyright laws, and I mean probably more than just that, laws in general.
Copyright, plagiarism, yeah, all of that. Like because you have to have those things in place, because otherwise, yes, AI will just continue to do this where like people that are building these programs, I don't have it like off the top of my head, but like so I've read an interesting quote from somebody that they were saying that like this AI is being used by a lot of people. I mean, specifically, like, I guess in regard to things that require some creativity or artistry, but it's being used by people who have no inherent creativity to produce something that feels creative, and they're obsessed with it, and so they don't want to stop. And it's like they need to be stopped, because you shouldn't be allowed to, whether it's just copying somebody's style or, you know, verbatim stealing from a paper they wrote. Like, you weren't allowed to do it before. You shouldn't be allowed to do it now just because it's under the guise of an AI program.
What do you guys think about being left behind? That kind of, I forgot that the episode ended this way, but thinking about like the yogurt eventually update just like one day just up and leaves and just takes no. But can you imagine? Like we've so much of science fiction is about us going to space. Imagine
we're not the ones to do it.
Yeah, imagine life choosing to go to space and it not being humans. Like imagine the feeling that would cause in us as a species, as the human race. Like, oh, like we have officially been like usurped, essentially.
Yeah,
we're no longer the dominant life form.
Too, because what if they come back?
Oof.
You know, in 100 years.
Yeah, that'd be the
years.
bigger concern. I would say probably in the short term it'd be a good feeling.
You broke up, Karina?
Oh, I was just saying, like, I think in the short term, like in the yogurt situation, in the short term, it'd probably be a feeling of relief. Like, hey, it's like the planet is ours again. And we know not to make that mistake again if it starts if we accidentally develop something else sentient, like we know to get rid of it.
I think that depends.
Not in the context of this episode. Like,
yeah, because they're in a utopia.
They're totally
live in a utopia.
They're totally dependent upon the yogurt at the point that the yogurt leaves. Like, I see this as like 99% of the human population dies after this event because people could not live without it anymore. That's what I think.
Well, yeah, because like imagine algorithms just one day left the planet. Right now, most of our infrastructure runs on algorithms, which is like a rudimentary form of AI. So if one day all the algorithms just poof disappeared, there goes power, there goes internet. Yeah, so I think it'd be a pretty bad scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess.
At least at first.
I guess if you're saying
back.
that, like, yeah, if you're totally dependent on it, it would be bad. I was just thinking like more from the, I guess the human side of it would be like, oh, it's gone.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, like Nate said, or Aaron, whichever one you said, like, but they might come back, and that would be the more concerning part. Would be like, short term, yay, they're gone, we have our lives back. Long term, ooh, what do we do if they come back? Like, are they going to be coming back in peace, or are they going to be coming back? Or will they have changed? Will something else be coming back and they sent it here? Like, who knows?
I think that's one of the more interesting consequences of the AI boom that we're having is the fact that we have to really reconcile with what it means to be a human and what it means to be intelligent, to have a soul, or to be sentient. Like, if we did have something that could just fix all of our problems, I think in a way that would be the worst thing possible to most people, because we need some form of struggle, or at least we think we do. We've never had the opportunity to have, a mode of being that doesn't have, that struggle. Even if we remove it from ourselves as much as we can in places like America. But yeah, that's part of being human.
Well, what we were talking about at first is like if things get so good that you don't have any real problems, you start inventing problems. And generally, the problems we invent are not only very petty, but like tend to snowball, or at least some of the more serious ones. So I think, yeah, like, not that I'm saying I want to not live in a first world country, but I think it's interesting. Like you compare, like Americans or other people living in first world countries to people living in places where they don't have the same luxuries we have, where they do have like, there is the real struggle of like, am I going to be able to feed my family today? Will I have a roof over my head at this time next year? Like all of those things where it's like when you have real struggles you have to come up against regularly, your outlook on life is totally different. Like what you value is totally different. The way you treat the people around you is going to be totally different. And like, yeah, I think that the more you remove an element of struggle or like worry from your life about meeting your needs, taking care of your responsibilities, then yeah, you end up in a situation where you're like, well, we're bored. What kind of trouble can we cause?
What is that saying about idle hands?
Devil's Playground, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, we're at like 52 minutes according to my recording. We should probably... I feel like we could talk about this kind of stuff all day.
Yeah, we definitely could.
Yeah.
The other two are not this deep, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're going to have the same value of conversation as we just did now. Let's go ahead and move on to the one that I picked. This is, I don't know if they have episode numbers, but this one is called The Witness, which is essentially, it's like a time loop. It's a paradox. No, it's not a time loop. It's a paradox, right? So you have this lady that's getting ready for work. And she witnesses the very end of a murder, right, across the street in the apartment building across the street, right? She sees the guy, so she freaks out, and she basically the whole episode is her running away from this guy until she actually ends up. Oh, and there's a very important part at the beginning where you see it from his perspective, where the lady that he just killed was her, right? Anyway, so then the episode continues on where basically she's running away from him the whole time, and it actually she ends up in his apartment, and he follows her there, comes in, they have a struggle, and she ends up killing him. And then across the street in her apartment, he's looking at her and just saw her murder him in his apartment, right? So it's like a time loop, except at the very end their places are flipped, right?
Yes.
Yeah, some sort of cycle.
Yeah, not really a time
I don't know
loop,
what you
because
would call it.
if they're forever changing places, yeah, I don't know what a paradox is maybe the better. I don't really know what the right term would be.
It's still a
It's
time
trippy.
loop. There's just 2 lines of code, right? Instead of 1 line of code.
I guess.
So what did you guys think about the art style, but also the animation in this one? Because to me, I found it to be a very strange blend of very intentionally cartoony, right? Because you're like, there's the very obvious drawn lines around to emphasize a lot of things, as well as like the words on the screen, paired with what I found to be almost like Uncanny Valley, ultra realistic movement animation.
Yeah, it kind of felt like I don't know what the right way, if it's like mocap or like,
Mocap,
obviously
yeah.
it looks better because it's newer, but like if you've seen the Beowulf movie, that they did that, like they had everybody acted out as like a mocap thing and then they animated it. So it is that weird, like Beowulf's not as bad in the Uncanny Valley because it's a lot older, but it's that same kind of thing where you're like, this feels like they filmed a real person doing this and then just ran it through a animation filter
Like if you
or something.
compare if you compare the realistic, not necessarily how it looks, but the fluidity of the movement, especially of the humans,
Yes.
like how they move compared to, because this is a few years old at this point, compared to whatever the best animation is right now, it still does not compare. So I actually feel like this had to have been mocap. I don't want to say I'm positive, but I that would be my hunch because it's just too realistic. Like I said, it's kind of an uncanny valley thing.
Of the two things that grabbed my attention with this episode, it's of course the weird little twist at the end and the animation. The animation is like if you haven't seen it, you have to watch it because I don't know, it's a testament to technology or something. I don't know what mocap is, but
Motion
whatever they did
capture.
to make this episode. Oh, okay, well, yeah, that's what.
Well, but like more specifically, it's like
They put you like in the suit with the little dots all over it.
yeah, the little dots so that like all of your movements are actually captured, and then they just put you just like computer generate an image over the top of the movements that the person actually did. So it's like a combination of actual footage and animation.
Yeah, they.
I was
I
gonna say
think
that's what it kind of looks like. It looks like they've, uh, videotaped it, and then literally just edited uh, the animations right over on top. Um,
Yeah.
that's just how realistic it looks, but also not.
In some ways, they very intentionally animated it, right? Like where there's lines drawn around things to emphasize them. You have the comic book words popping up. Like they went that angle with it. They went both ways with it, right?
it's like the faces. You look at the faces and you don't get that uncanny valley usually. Like the faces are very like cartoony, and then yeah, like the backgrounds that are drawn are like even more so in a lot of ways. But then yeah, like it's the human motions of the body and whatever is where you're like, oh, weird. And so it really does stick with you, I guess, unlike the animation in really any of the other ones in any season.
Yeah, there's a wide shot where she's running across the screen, and everything around her just looks so realistic, but just with a animated tint to it. Um, that yeah is really impressive.
I also find it interesting that there are no other people in this entire city. Like there are, like you see cars driving around. And then when she's at her like the weird strip club, sex house kind of a thing, whatever it is, there's people there. But the entire chase throughout the whole city, like you don't see a single other person. It's like a city with some vehicles moving, but there's actually no people at all. Which I found it felt more like more like a 1v1 on a enormous video game map. You know what I'm saying? It's like a way too large like map on Call of Duty or something with just a 1v1 because there's no other like people running around.
Yeah, legitimately, I think outside of the whatever strip club, whatever place that she works, like the only other human interaction she has are the two phone calls she makes.
Yeah.
She gets a voicemail and then she calls like 911. But yeah, like you don't even see, I don't think you even see like the back of the head of her cab driver or anything.
I was gonna say
No.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like yeah, it's interesting. It's like single. Well, I guess it makes me wonder if it's like some sort of weird simulation or something, right? It because it's obviously something weird happening because you have the weird time loop. So it makes me wonder, like, is this supposed to be happening in the real world and something weird happen, or are we like in sort of inside of some sort of, you know, computer program or weird simulation? But
It'd be hilarious if uh, the city being empty was not like intentional at all. Like it was just an accident.
when they were filming,
They didn't consider that. Yeah.
or if they did
Yeah,
mocap,
just-
they're like, yeah, we're not gonna pay a bunch of extras to walk around, so let's just clear it, and we just won't have anybody.
I know obviously it's not designed to tell that kind of story, but it makes me wonder with the origins of like whatever this time loop is, like why it's happening, because clearly like normally these people go about their day doing whatever and don't have this, and then randomly this one day it starts and it's like,
Well, I also think it's
what is
it's
the-
interesting. Like from the beginning, she sees him murder somebody, but she doesn't know who. And so the whole episode, she's just running away from a murderer of which she was the witness. Whereas the whole episode, he is the one that actually like from his perspective, like his mind is like going crazy because he just accidentally killed this girl, or maybe intentionally, we don't know. But he just killed this girl, and now he looks across the street, and there she is. So like the whole episode, and
Yeah.
he like what he's going through must be insane, right?
Well, and
Right.
if this is like a continuation, if it's a cycle, then he just was running across the entire city while she was chasing him, which it looks like that's the way it is because the way that the episode ends.
Uh huh.
She's chasing him. He murders her, and then he looks over and realizes that the person that was chasing him is alive and across the street. Which that could have been a twin or something. That we might be making this way more complicated than it has to be. We just watched two twins
That's actually
die, but
that's a good point. It's possible, right?
But how often is it twins, really?
But also, how horny must have the person been that came up with this? Because this is so
Oh my god.
heavy.
When I was watching this, I was like, way to go, Nate picked the episode with the full frontal nudity in it.
hey, you know me. No, like, yeah, I was kind of like, I wonder what the inception, like, what the idea was, why to put it in this setting, why to have like this weirdly.
I feel like that
It
makes
almost
it
feels
even
like-
funnier if it was mocap because, like, somebody really they were like, we have to make it
Right.
animated because we're putting it
Or
on
else this
Netflix,
is
and we can't just put-
NC-17, right?
But other than that, we still want we want it to be as realistic as
Yeah.
possible. Because they spend a long time on that dance scene.
Yeah, they do.
right. Which makes me wonder, like, do you guys have any theories as to what sort of deeper meaning there might be behind it, this whole story, or do you think that it's just you get what you get? This is what they were intending.
I don't think that they were shooting for a deep meaning in any way. I think they were just playing with a fun idea, right? Like with this kind of like psychological, a mind bending, like, what if you saw your own murder kind of a thing. I think that's
Yeah,
more
I
of it's
didn't-
just like this psychological playing with this weird isolated scenario.
Yeah, nothing about it made me, unlike the yogurt one, nothing about it really like pricked anything that made me think, oh, maybe they're alluding to this, or maybe they're trying to make a statement about this. It's like I kind of just felt like a fun sci-fi kind of idea of like, oh, what if these people were trapped in this time loop where they are witnessing their own murder?
Well, on my way home, I was, giving it my darndest to try to come up with something, and generational trauma, I feel like could be a good
Go on.
metaphor
Go on.
for. I didn't like really, pull this out and like try to disprove it in my own head, or you know what I mean. I
Uh-huh.
didn't try to work through this. But yeah, in a way, it could be, the guy murders the girl, unintentionally, of course, just as no one really intends to pass on generational trauma, and then he chases after this person, and then eventually she ends up murdering him, and then sees that, oh, he's actually down there, I should chase him and try to talk to him or something like that. And yeah, it could be a metaphor in the sense that generational trauma is not something that is normally intentional and gets passed on, and the consequences of it lead you to act in a certain way or think in a certain way that ends up somehow causing more, and the evolution just continues, or the cycle continues. So I guess in the sense that it's a cycle.
How would you define generational trauma, though?
I wouldn't.
Like, I don't know if there is a hard definition for that. I feel like it's kind of a loosey-goosey thing.
I guess generational trauma being, in my head, the way that you were raised makes you live and think in a certain way, which I think is an interesting idea. And we could talk about that and how like we probably don't have free will as people, but yeah, you live and think in a certain way, and then when you end up having kids, you end up passing, something to them. Like even if you intentionally try to avoid giving them the same hangups that you have, that very act of intentionally trying to avoid something is the generational trauma affecting you, and therefore affecting the way that you're raising your child, and they might do the same thing. Blah blah
Well, children imitate, right? So like if your parent or like one of your parents or whatever is like bipolar or ultra depressed or super anxious or whatever, like that's the sort of thing that a child, if it's exposed to it like way too often, way too much, could pick up on and start to emulate and actually develop then actual depression or whatever, because that was just in a way, so they were just around it so much in their most formative years, right?
Well, even if they don't try to emulate it, they are probably going to come up with some sort of coping mechanism. He says as he hits his vape. Yeah, so it's not like, all cut and dry, as this story is not either. You think that you are having the best of intentions, chasing down this person and trying to tell them, because he's always like, wait, I'm trying to talk to you or something like that.
Yeah.
And then because the other person has no idea of what this other person has just been through,
Yeah.
they're not thinking of that from their perspective, and yeah, the cycle continues. So yeah, that was me trying my darndest to like try to come up with some sort of deeper meaning to where this
I guess
originated.
without making the leap to generational trauma, you could at least say that what we're playing with here is two people who have the same experience, but they have very different perspectives on what happened, right? She witnessed a murder, she's freaking out, and the murderer's chasing her, presumably to eliminate the last witness, right?
That's not what I thought.
No, but like from her perspective, right?
From her perspective,
okay,
that's why she's
yeah.
running.
That's why she's being
Yeah.
chased. That's why he's chasing her. But from his perspective, he just had a surreal experience, and he needs to go like figure out what's going on. He needs to go discover the truth about whatever weird thing just happened, right? This weird like supernatural experience that he just had. So it's two people. It could be perceived as miscommunication because people are having two different perspectives on the same event or the same issue, right? And it causes problems. And in this scenario, somebody ends up getting murdered,
Yeah.
But it could
and
be,
both of them are
like
responding instinctually rather than, he keeps saying, hey, let's talk, but she's responding instinctually rather than being like, yeah, okay, let's communicate.
Good episode. Even if it doesn't have like obvious substance for you to dig into, it does stick out to you, in your head.
To me, it's a very entertaining and
I wonder
trippy-
why.
But like I like anything with a twist. I like twists,
Yeah.
And so
Curves.
yeah, exactly. So I always appreciate something that has that. Hey, wait a minute. The definition of gaslighting is no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's move on to Karina's episode then. Karina, go for it.
Yeah, so the episode I picked was Helping Hand, and it is an astronaut who is sent up to do repairs on a satellite. She's sent up as on a solo mission, I guess. It's just supposed to be routine maintenance. She complains about how, they're just trying to save money. They should have sent two, but no, they only sent one because they could afford to. And then while she's repairing the satellite, she gets hit with a large piece of debris that's in orbit, and it punctures her oxygen tanks. What are you laughing at?
No, I just think it's funny that like there's just like we can get into it later, but like the fact that there's just like a screw just flying through space. I have some like. Yeah, go ahead. We'll come back to it. Go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, she gets hit with this piece of debris that's in orbit. It knocks her loose, it doesn't knock her loose. It makes her lose her balance a little bit where she's holding on, but also it punctures her oxygen tanks. It damages her mobility control, like having the ability to kind of like power herself around. And then as that's malfunctioning, like it ends up kind of throwing her off of the whatever you want to call it, the satellite. So she's now away from it. She's not tethered to it at all. She's by herself. Ground control says that they have people coming to save her, but it's going to take 58 minutes. She has 14 minutes of oxygen remaining. She ends up, initially she like takes off her glove and lets her hand freeze. And she throws it as a way to give herself momentum to propel herself back to the satellite. She barely misses grabbing onto it. And so then she makes the decision to snap off her frozen arm and throw that, and it gets her back to her little shuttle. And then she lets ground control like, yeah, I'm good. I'm coming home.
I just want to say that, like, real world scenario, she is, because my first thought was like, oh, okay, her arm's frozen, it's numb, right? She's not acting like it's numb. Real world scenario, she's passing out from the pain, 100%. Like, if she can still feel this, she's definitely, like, 99 out of 100 people pass out from the pain in this situation.
Potentially. I wasn't sure, though, like, I mean, I don't know a lot about how things freezing, like human flesh freezing in space would work. But I did wonder, like, if maybe it's such a, I mean, because what, space is 0 degrees Kelvin, right? So I mean, it's like a level of cold we can't imagine. Like, I wonder if it's just such an instantaneous freeze that you wouldn't actually have any like real like sensations of it. Like if it would just happen so fast that those nerves would just be dead.
Yeah, I think it would happen very quickly.
Right, but I'm saying, like, I don't know if you'd actually really feel it. I mean, maybe you would, I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe it wouldn't be enough of a sensation for somebody to pass out.
No. I'm talking about when she snaps her arm off. She's obviously still feeling something when she snaps her arm off. And I think that, it's kind of like how you can't asphyxiate yourself, right? You can't just hold your breath and kill yourself.
Yeah, but
you don't have the will to do it. Like, I feel like in this situation, either A, the pain is making her pass out, or B, there's just like a survival mental block that wouldn't let you do that.
Well, you can't asphyxiate yourself because your lungs
pass
are
out and then your body
will start breathing. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that's not a great comparison. But I do think, though, that that's not necessarily true, that you would, like, have a survival instinct that wouldn't let you. I think it's the opposite. I think your survival instincts would allow you to override your brain. Because you think about, like, that guy who, like, whatever he did, would he cut off his arm or his leg because he was trapped in a rock? So I'm saying I think that it'd be the opposite. I think if you're in a situation where, like, she knows she's down to, like, literally seconds left of oxygen, that she's able, that the adrenaline and just like the survival instincts would be what would allow you to do something so drastic as snapping off your own arm, even if you could still feel it, because you know it's that or you're going to die.
Probably depends on the person. Some people.
Well, and astronauts are like typically exceptional people, right?
Well, so
Usually.
Then that leads into something else I want to talk about here, which is, I don't think it gives us a date for when this is taking place, but this is obviously at some point in probably the relatively near future, right? Where space travel is becoming, maybe not space travel, but like humans are in space more than they are now. Because we have a corporation that's cutting costs intentionally on these people that are out there doing maintenance on a satellite, right? Now, obviously there's still plenty of people living on the Earth, whatever, so it's not like a far future thing. But I found it interesting that, like, it feels like kind of this era maybe of humans in space where, I don't know, so maybe thinking about like the Industrial Revolution, where it starts out where people are starry-eyed and it's incredible, right? But then before too long, you get these people that come into it. As it becomes more accessible to more people start entering into the Industrial Revolution, trying to just squeeze it for all it's worth, right? Like they're just in it for however it can benefit them. And I feel like that's where we are with space travel in this episode, where like we've reached the point where there are now corporations that are just trying to squeeze everything they can out of it, right? They're cutting costs. I feel like there were a couple other things happening in this episode. One is the screw that's flying around, right? It's like just kind of this haphazard sort of a like, this is the situation we're in now, where it's just like, yeah, there's just shrapnel haphazardly flying through Earth's orbit, right?
You also see it with multiple pieces of equipment and the pod she takes itself. Like she has to smack a screen to get it to like
exactly right.
stop glitching.
Stuff like that.
The door won't open all the way, and she has to kind of throw her body weight into it to get it to open the rest of the way. So you definitely see that like she's not using maybe not state of the art, but like she's not using equipment that is being maintained properly. Like clearly, like you said, there's people, whoever's in charge doesn't care a whole lot about what actually happens to the people that are using this equipment, whether that's like as extreme as they don't care if something happens like catastrophically and somebody dies, or they just don't care enough to like make their jobs easy to just do the basic like maintenance and what it takes to keep things running smoothly while these maintenance people are going back and forth doing their job.
But would it work?
But oh yeah, right. Let's have a physics conversation.
Yeah, that's what
I've
I'm
been trying to
wondering.
avoid that.
Yeah, for real. I don't think it would. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would. I don't know. That's a good question. I've never been in zero gravity, so like on the one hand, I could see where like theoretically the physics.
On the one
work.
hand.
My bad. So I could see how it could work theoretically, but the flip side is, would it have to, maybe it could work potentially, but like would your glove or your hand be enough to propel you? Or would
that's
you
what
need
I was
something
saying, yeah,
more
like,
sizable.
Well, it would.
Yeah.
It would, but it wouldn't maybe do it as fast as it does her, right? Like it
Okay.
would get you moving in the direction opposite of which you throw it.
And you won't
But
stop
she'd probably be
moving,
moving a
but-
lot slower. Yeah, you won't stop, but it would be a much slower process.
I guess maybe that was a decision from their part to not make the episode like 20
Yeah.
minutes of her just
Right.
slowly floating
Hella
back.
boring, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. At some point they're like, they're trying to build tension with the lack of oxygen and that's running out and everything, and she's got limited time. But yeah, if it's like, okay, it's gonna take me 15 minutes to get back, like, yeah, you can't show too much of that or the tension is gone.
A couple other things I noticed. One, she doesn't have a tether, which I find, like, again, coming back to like this kind of junky
Okay, but she has a
space travel,
propulsion
right?
system.
Doesn't matter.
I'm just
Doesn't
saying,
matter.
but like they do give her that. It's
Nobody
not like she's
in
just
this-
kicking herself over there. She has a propulsion system that she's supposed to be able to use, but it gets damaged.
Nobody in this situation would not have a tether. That's all I'm saying. But
You would think, unless this has become so commonplace that normally, I don't know, it's like anything. If you see
Even
something-
so, I wouldn't go out there.
I know, but,
I guess-
but I'm just trying to say, like, hypothetically, obviously, yeah, none of us has even been to space, so, like, we would be super careful because it would be very stressful. But I'm saying, like, you think about all of the things that people do on a regular basis, like, either just as part of their normal life or as part of their job,
yeah.
that are actually pretty high-risk things, but you've done it so many times without there being a problem that you start to cut corners. And you start to be like, well, it doesn't matter if I do this because I've never had a problem with it before and nobody I know who I work with has ever had a problem. So we are just going to take this step out, or we're going to, kind of gloss over whatever. And it's fine until it's not fine. And then obviously, like, depending on the industry or like what the activity is, it could be really, really bad. But it's things like that where, like, if you did do this all the time, like if you're somebody who's routinely doing maintenance up there and you're constantly going in and out of space and going to these things, maybe you would get to a point where you wouldn't feel like you needed to tether because you're like, I have a propulsion pack. I've never had a problem. Why would I take the extra 3 minutes to do this? I just want to get it over with and go back.
Yeah, I think if you, I'm thinking about like famous pictures of like construction workers in like 1900s America, like sitting on skyscraper, like beams, like way up in the air, right? It's like, well, who in their right mind would do that? And it's like, well, I guess if they spend so much time doing it that they couldn't be bothered with the extra safety steps because it's just not convenient, right? So I guess
And you get acclimated to your surroundings, just like they get
Yeah,
acclimated
yeah.
to being, however many stories up in the air without a harness. If you would get acclimated to being in space too. I mean, it seems crazy, but because like, yeah, I'd be way too stressed out. This whole episode gives me anxiety, but
I knew what was gonna happen, and the whole episode gave me anxiety.
yeah, exactly. Like, I think partly because it's like that would be. I feel like it's all of the worst things you could imagine about being in space, like from a practicality, not like bringing sci-fi into it, but just like space travel and doing things in space as we know it currently. This seems like a culmination of the worst possible things you could have happen in space, which is like I think just adds to me. I already don't like the idea of ever like I wouldn't want to travel to space, and this just is like the cherry on top of like reasons not to go to space.
Wait, so real talk, would you guys ever go to space?
No.
Man, it's so hard to say, right? Because on the one hand, the
Space.
yeah, on the one hand, space, like the experience is almost worth the risk, but I'm not sure it's quite worth the risk, you know. But then, think about like flying in airplanes, right? Like, you know, the majority of people in the world would have said that about airplanes, right? And so, if in our lifetime excursions to space become commonplace to the point where you don't have to just be, part of the 1% to do it or do it as a job, I might consider it, especially later in life, not to be macabre, but, you have less to lose if you're 90 than if you're
Right.
29. So,
Yeah. I think there's probably something to be said really for like what you're born into because yeah, obviously like if you're born into the age of like air travel, then yes, it's very normal. And like I don't like flying, but it's also something that I'm like realistically I know the risks of flying are no worse than like getting in a car and I also do that all the time. But yeah, with like space travel being so new still relatively that yeah, it's terrifying still just because there are so many unknowns and there's just like you don't have the repetition to iron out all of the potential issues the same way that you have with airplanes or cars. So maybe like even if it doesn't really happen in our lifetime, like maybe like our kids or our grandkids, it might be so commonplace by then that they wouldn't even really think twice about it.
not to get off tangent again too much, but just I just have the
Earth.
episode playing here, and just at the end here, uh, I love that on her screen, she's sitting here like she's just gone through this traumatic experience. On her screen, a message is flashing that says overtime unauthorized. To me, that's just
Yeah.
the cherry on top of like this is all like just coming back to this like corporations not caring about people, all they care about is profit, and it's just like that's what space travel has become in this, in this near future. I just find it funny.
Even more so, that's what I'm saying. She doesn't want to take the extra minutes to tether because it's like, look, I just want to do what I have to do and get home so I don't get in trouble so I can just be done.
Yeah.
I don't need my boss getting on my ass because I went 5 minutes overtime.
Well, wait a minute. She's clearly paid by the hour, so she should be putting the tether on.
Haha, you're right. Well, okay. No, but here's the thing is like it's the work-life balance, right? So it's like, when I worked for a moving company, it's like, well, as soon as you're done with the job, you come back and then you can go home. So you can drag it out to milk it, or you can just get it done and come back. And most of the time people just want to get it done and come back. So,
Yeah, but also, like, I don't know, to get it done faster and then just sit around because you're still on the clock until a certain time. Or if you, God forbid, you finish before you were supposed to, quote unquote, and then now you're, out 30 minutes pay because you went too fast.
yeah, right, because you cut safety corners.
Yeah. I think that she didn't have a tether because that would have ruined the premise of the episode.
No,
It would've had to have been like
you could
a
easily
floating knife or something
you
like that.
could easily skirt that. There's chaos when she gets punctured. There's chaos. You can take that situation and you can make the rope get cut or whatever.
I also, like, it was clearly a piece of scrap metal. Like, all you have to do is give that thing a sharp edge that could cut through a tether. Like, or you could lean into the like, oh, you know, again, cutting the company cutting corners and not doing regular maintenance, whatever. Be like, oh, it's a faulty tether, it's got issues. Like we've seen that all the other stuff
Yeah,
has issues.
that would
like
be
it could
great.
just snap
So
on
she's
its
just
own.
super freaking unlucky, I guess.
No, if like the origin
That's
point
what
of the winch is like pretty kind of sketchy, so like she gets punctured, she's kind of flailing, freaking out, and then it rips out of the, you know, the harness, or the tether rips out of its origin point in the little spaceship thing. That would just be the
Yeah.
cherry on top.
Yeah. So you could absolutely include one and still have her be in exactly the same situation without having to change the premise of the episode at all. I don't know. This one is just like it wasn't as I mean, it was still like freaked me out a little watching it a second time, but I remember the first time I watched this one, like the reason I had to pick it was because it really did just sit with me. Like I remember just sitting
Yeah.
there afterwards and being like, that freaks me out so much. Like, cause like, I mean, honestly, this one is definitely geared more to just be like horror to some extent. Like that's a pretty, like that's a in the list of bad situations to find yourself in, like that would be high on my list.
Uh-huh.
Not disassembling yourself and washing a pool for eternity.
See, that one was just more like existential. Like that one, because he was doing that by choice because he was getting back to his roots. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. But like, I feel like this one is more interesting just because it's like, blah, it's freaky. The other one is like, oh, what is life?
Actually,
What
actually,
has
Zima
meaning?
Blue was another one that was in the toss-up for me because I also
It
remember
is an
being
interesting
just
one.
kind of, yeah, like you could talk about it for sure. We're not going to, and
Definitely.
we never will because we're moving on to season 2 next. But
Unless we get a bunch of fans writing in saying, please do more. But
Yeah.
it's never going to happen.
yeah, you know, we've had 5 years to try to break into that, and it hasn't happened yet. So let's not.
Well, it would help if we were
Expect.
more. If we were more consistent, we'd have a better chance at having fans.
That's true. We do have a consistency issue.
Not my fault. Do we upload to YouTube?
We will start doing that with this episode because that's actually where the bigger audience is now for sure.
Yeah, and like people could comment if they wanted to.
Yeah, that's true. Spotify doesn't have that.
It does actually, but that is the feature that's not going to be used. Like I just saw very recently that Spotify podcasts have comment sections now, but
Oh.
And like
it's not.
nobody
gonna
does
be
that.
used. No, it's not going to be used.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That wraps up our discussion of some highlights of season 1 of Love, Death, and Robots, and other topics. Because hey, this podcast is limited to everything, right? So
Hey.
yeah, this is a weak ending. This is trash. I mean,
Compared
this is garbage. Thanks for listening.
to. Bye bye. That sounds like a hassle.